Thanks so much, Stephanie. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We have three incredibly gifted and very dynamic panelists with us. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. Minji Kong, who's over at the University of Delaware as a doctoral student. Latrenda Sherrill, who is over with Remake Learning, and someone that we recently partnered with on a PA Smart Grant. And Kelsey Tackett, who is a digital learning coach over at Floyd County Schools in Kentucky. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves individually. But yeah, we're really excited to talk about computational thinking. As Stephanie points out, it's a very dynamic topic right now. Computer science remains one of the most lack of diversity in terms of giving broader access to a wide range of students. And so there's still a lot of challenges, but also opportunities out there on the landscape. Right now, we have all 50 states with CS standards, but what's happening within these states is some districts are really picking things up and really moving with it, and other districts are still trying to figure out how this whole element of computer science and computational thinking come together. But let me have the individual panelists sort of introduce themselves at this point in time and talk a little bit about who they are and what brought them here today and their own experience with computational thinking. Minji, I'm going to start with you. Can you just talk us a little bit about your work right now over at Delaware and how you got introduced to computational thinking? Then we'll move over to Latrenda and then go to Kelsey.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Minji Kong. I go by she, her. As Quinn introduced, I'm a PhD student studying computer science at the University of Delaware. I just finished my third year here. I have been involved, I guess, in more of the local efforts around computational thinking in the state of Delaware since 2019. I've been field teaching as an undergraduate in different, local K-12 settings in the state, and then also being involved with our yearly summer professional development program that we offer to the local teachers here who are interested in incorporating computational thinking into their curricula, whether that be in English, math, science, subject-wise, it doesn't really quite matter. And so I've been co-instructing units on Scratch, block-based programming, how they could use those exercises to fuse it with other subjects along with computational thinking, and also starting units on artificial intelligence and how that intertwines with CT as well. My personal work-wise, I also work with the local teachers here to co-design tools that could potentially help them personalize learning experiences for students as they're learning more about computational thinking, and hopefully allowing that to kind of hold students a bit more closer and interested in learning more about it going forward. But good to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's great, Minji. We're glad you're here. Thank you. Latrenda, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to CS and CT. Glad you have you with us today.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Latrenda, zooming in from Pittsburgh. As Quinn said, I am with the Remake Learning Network. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I serve as a working group strategist with Remake Learning. Remake Learning, in case folks didn't know, is a free peer network for educators and innovators in the greater Pittsburgh region. So we like to think as our world changes, education must change too. And we think that no one organization can transform teaching and learning alone. And so we exist to bring them together, right? We make it easier for educators to collaborate across sectors in order to reduce duplication, leverage resources for greater impact, find funding, explore professional learning opportunities. And currently we are made up of about 1,200 plus members from across the 10-county region in Southwestern PA. And we host a bunch of events and coordinate a ton of topical work groups and things. And so, we do a lot to exist in the gap, I would say, as it relates to what happens with educators and the rest of the ecosystem. And I've been with Remake Learning for about 5 years now. I helped to launch our Computer Science for Pittsburgh effort, CS for PGH for short. It's a work group of Remake Learning, a topical-based work group that has brought together a number of stakeholders in computer science I would say since about 2018, in an effort to keep the momentum for computer science happening. And so, from my perspective, there's been a lot that exists, if you're in education, right? Like, that standards are changing, that maybe people are talking about this, maybe, right? But then there are other folks in the ecosystem. There are out of school time educators. There are librarians, right? There are, security guards. There are, early childhood educators. And we are doing our best to try to bring some of that, what's happening at the policy level for some of these particular pieces of education to the classroom, to the outside the classroom, right? To all of these different places. So the momentum can stay and the appetite can build for this work. I think education in general, right, is such a powerful tool, and it's just as powerful, right, as those who sort of know about the pathways. And so we exist to kind of spread the love, so to speak, about some of these pathways. And we definitely see computer science as an opportunity for equity, right, as an opportunity for engagement, and to do all of those things.
That's great, LaTrenda. And I think one of the things that I think we would like to talk about today too, and I know you've worked very concertedly about it, is what you said about this question of duplication. Are kids getting the same thing all over and over? How do we make sure that what they're getting in second grade builds on in third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade? And not just in school, but out of school as well, which is a whole set of opportunities as well as challenges. Our third panelist, very glad she's with us today, Kelsey Tackett. Kelsey, I'm going to pass it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Quinn. My name is Kelsey Tackett, and I'm currently hired as a digital learning coach in Floyd County. That is located in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in Eastern Kentucky. I was formerly a science and English language arts teacher, so I've spent 12 years in the classroom and just recently transitioned out in September. Now in this digital learning coach role, I service the district. So I travel from each of our 8th grade classrooms in Floyd County, and I teach them computer science and engineering lessons that are based around Project Lead the Way curriculum and our Kentucky standards. So that allows me to give students a really firm foundation and monitor kind of their mastery and evidence for that, so that we can support them in their interest of exploring different pathways that we offer in Floyd County. Our district is made up of about 6,000 students with a 77% free and reduced lunch rate. And so I really feel like as we talk today, that kind of demographic will paint a picture of some of the challenges and opportunities we have in Floyd County. So thank you very much. I'm excited to be here today.
We're excited you're here as well. Noel just put a definition. He's joining us from University of Maryland, talking about what we mean by CT. And I think it's just before we get sort of into sort of the opportunities and challenges, it is worth just sort of saying what we mean by CT. And we have a recent report that Digital Promise put out called Computational Thinking for an Inclusive World, resource for educators to learn and lead. So I'm going to put that in the chat. I think that's probably for some folks already on your radar. But for our purposes today on the webinar, we really are talking about CT as not simply just problem solving, but problem solving systematically, and oftentimes using digital devices to do it. At Digital Promise, we've really focused on these elements of competencies. And so what do we mean by CT? Well, we're talking about working with data, using algorithms, understanding information through mental models, physical models. All these are the components of CT. The terms computational thinking itself kind of entered the wider lexicon right around 2006. And for us, it's a kind of shorthand to also say, how do we integrate computing into other subject areas? And that's a challenge, but there's also a lot of opportunities, especially on the K-8 level. LaTrenda had mentioned when she was doing her introduction, some of the challenges around equity. And what we're learning now is that if you're offering standalone high school classes, oftentimes these classes are just not attracting students, because if they don't have prior exposure on those K-8 years, even when there's some kind of offering on the high school level in CS, kids simply don't see themselves as part of that. And so that's a huge challenge. But for our purposes, when we talk about CT, we really are talking about these fundamental competencies and where we can find integration points. So I'm going to go back to Minji here, who has worked very closely developing real tools and resources here. Minji, where do you see some of the challenges and opportunities specific to CT, and where have you seen that within your own work? I mean, what's been very exciting for you? And then, conversely, what has been something that you kind of feel like is going to be a persistent challenge?
I think the folks who are being introduced to computational thinking for the first time may have a bit of a confusion around what computational thinking may mean. So, our priority when we were offering professional development programs, for instance, was always trying to ground everyone in some shared definition of what computational thinking might entail. It also has served, I guess, some kind of a joining point that connects both the researchers and teachers together and trying to get us all engaged in integrating computer science into other subjects. So usually practitioners lack of some shared understanding of what computational thinking might mean. Albeit, it's I guess the fact that we currently do not have some distinct definition of what computational thinking might be may have a factor as to that challenge. In terms of trying to address it, we've tried to, like I said, offer a shared definition and then provide as many different examples of how computational thinking might look in other subject areas, providing as many different examples of how the fusion of computer science with computational thinking with other subjects might look, pointing them out to different curricular examples, activities, and so on. And that kind of gets them thinking, oh, okay, this is how it might actually look in real life, and giving them how it might actually look in classrooms. That imagery helps them to kind of get rid of that confusion a little bit in our shared space. But that's the way we've been approaching, I think, for the past 10 years as a resource.
That's great. And Latrenda, with Remake Learning, which has so many different initiatives, but I think one of the things that your organization has really tried to focus on is being, productive, creative. Do you want to talk a little bit about, your efforts around CT, how it fits in the wider Remake kind of portfolio of work you're doing?
Yeah. We exist in the ecosystem, as I said before. So we're constantly trying to educate the educators, right? I think, I think the last speaker just talked about, right, the idea that practitioners need some type of understanding and shared understanding of what exists in the space. And that's literally what our role is. How do we uplift these examples, right, to the broader ecosystem? How do we translate it for policymakers? How do we translate it for funders? How do we translate it for superintendents, and then, administrators, and then educators in the classroom, and then everyone else in the ecosystem that exists in a child's life? So, as I said before, the librarian, the early childhood educator, what is their role along this pipeline of work, right? And as they're interacting, like, what are the things that they can do to catalyze more of this thinking for young people? And so we've done that in a number of different ways. One of the ways that we've tried to highlight the small bets that people can make when it comes to computational thinking. Years ago, we just scanned our region for how people were doing that. And so, as educators, we're really excited about CS and CT, and they were getting trained on a number of different things. We were like, okay, what are you doing? What are you changing in your schedule to make this happen? Who are you collaborating with to make this happen? Are you purchasing something new to make this happen? And literally organize a quick start guide for folks in our region to do that. And so we were able to communicate. We were able to do that, right? Other people are doing their thing. They're working in their spaces. And we were able to lift some of that up to then say to funders, one, we need more ecosystem building so we can share with people this. We need to get them together to talk more about these different things, right? And then we really need to think about, to our state level folks, like, look, this is totally happening, right? You've said you wanted to change some standards, right? Like what else needs to be put out into the space? And so we utilize a lot of the tools that we create to help to advocate for more things. And I would say the other thing that was really apparent for us was around like inclusion, as you spoke about, Quinn. And so we started a series with the help of some funding from the BNY Mellon Foundation that we call CS for Inclusion. And so over time, we've began to talk about what are the ways in which early childhood educators are finding those creative things to do with early learners around computational thinking. What is the intersection of race and technology, right? Like, how do we have conversations about communities' thoughts around technology in general, right? How do we make the space more aware of that when we're thinking about approaches? And so, again, it's been us sort of looking at the ecosystem and saying, like, what do people need to know? There's some information here. There's some community building here that needs to happen. And then there needs to be some funding and some advocacy. So that's sort of been our approach. We've done a lot of little things in between that time, but that's how we like to look at it.
Yeah, and I appreciate, LaTrina, you bringing up elementary too, because oftentimes it's always assumed that, high school is going to do it and maybe middle school. But what we found with some of the work we've done with Digital Promise too is sometimes the elementary teachers are the ones who are more willing to sort of wade into the water and take a chance on this stuff. And so it kind of builds from the ground up, which can be really a positive type of thing. As Minji said too, I mean, I think one of the things that's going on and has everyone's kind of very alert, this question of AI and where that's coming. And so when LaTrina, you talk about it sort of as a broader literacy, I think that can be very appealing too, make people feel like, there's always this sorts of AI is either going to have great promise or the robots are coming for our jobs. But I think having more kind of concerted focus on CT as sort of a literacy that kids need to be sort of aware of what these underlying kind of components are will make them a lot more confident when it comes to sort of, the future of sort of the workforce itself. Kelsey, I'm going to go over to you. One of the things that has been a big challenge and is teachers just feeling capacity. I mean, LaTrina made a reference of, hey, what are you doing? And there's only so much time in the school day. So something has to get given up. I know you as a teacher have done a lot of work in integrating it within your own lessons, but you're also working with a lot of teachers in Floyd to sort of help them kind of get over this hump of, how do I do this? Where do I find space for this? So can you talk a little bit about your experience in that regard?
Absolutely. In Floyd County, when we started to look at computational thinking and computer science and the standards that come along with us, and us really, LaTrina, you said the small bets, like us as a district making a small bet of how do we, create more equity between all of our schools. What we started to notice is, we went through the CS for All process and started to evaluate ourselves on that script rubric. And we saw that, what was happening at one school was inconsistent throughout our district. And so looking at that from a district standpoint, we started to evaluate what were those barriers and how could we remove them. And so Quinn mentioning, just the capacity of teachers, feeling overwhelmed, I'm having to start from scratch. And really teachers, in their brains, we are masters of practice. So when we try new things or when we feel uncomfortable and not supported, then we don't feel like we're a master of the practice in our classroom. And so in Floyd County, we did a lot of things to remove some barriers. One thing we did is we created a STEM lending library. So at our district level, we have an entire room where all teachers are welcome to check out different resources that promote computational thinking and computer science. So whether those are Makey kits or Hummingbird kits, those are free, for everyone to use, and they check it in and out just like a library system. So that was one way, because we saw at some of our schools, the funding was not there to support, buying new resources for them to be integrated into their classroom. A second thing we did is we mapped out some computational thinking standards within our district so that we could promote that. And then we also had teachers who created a resource bank. So we have a resource library of different lessons that teachers can engage with. So you see different clips of examples of that happening in the classroom. You even have things like worksheets and other resources where a teacher who might not feel masterful with computational thinking can still grab something and say, hey, this is a small bet that I can make. I can do this one practice. I can try this out and get some feedback. And it's not an evaluative process. It's more just, filling this out? How can we find connections even to integrate that cross-curricularly? And then, really looking at what were the impacts and, positive outcomes that happened when you incorporated those. So looking at those barriers, it was really important for us to try to remove as many things as possible so that we can support our teachers, because people who feel supported are definitely going to have a more, positive outlook on trying something new. And then that is going to create more buy-in district-wide. So I really felt like that was important. And, moving forward, we're looking at different competencies and just different resources that we can continue to provide for our teachers to make it even more widespread.
That's great. No, I think especially as a 7-year teacher on the high school level, Kelsey, I think one of the things, especially when you're very early in your education career, you don't want to lose face. And so sometimes trying new things as a teacher can be kind of daunting, because if you feel like you mess up or you don't do it quite the right way, you feel like the kids are kind of on you. So I think one of the things you've done great, and Floyd in general has done wonderful, is just making sure that they have that support network and people have resources. They have people in the schools they can go to who have some level of expertise here. Yeah, we had some really very, very interesting conversations in our, but one of the big questions I think that I'm looking at here, and this is stuff we had discussed too, how do we ensure students are actually ready for this, and pre-K ready in particular? So I do have some curiosity here about teacher prep. We had Neil with us and Latrenda over in Pennsylvania, and Javier is out in Texas. So different states, different districts have different kind of trainings for teachers. My experience is that largely these trainings are all really for in-service. So I'm just curious whether or not folks are aware of more pre-service options for teachers, if that's going to get continued groundswell as we move forward. And so as we're bringing teachers into the profession, they're already going to have some background on this. I'm just curious whether folks have experience with that or ideas of what has been working on your own end.
I guess I could get started. At least from our university, we have been introducing a couple of course requirements that requires pre-service teachers to familiarize themselves with what computational thinking is all about, how to emphasize achieving computational or technological literacy amongst their students, despite what grade they might be in. So that's one way of training, but I know that not all teachers come from an formal educational training at a university setting. So I think statewide resources have to continue to be offered, or even at a federal level, which would be even greater. It's just, I think there's still some inconsistency in terms of what kind of access to resources teachers may have across different states and regions that it has not been quite achieved.
Yeah, Minji, I appreciate you saying that. I think sometimes too, it's getting to the point where kids, especially with a tool like Scratch, enough of them, it's been around long enough now that I think some kids have already had it in their own schooling. So sometimes these teachers sort of have it by default. Whether or not they're getting deliberate pedagogy, though, from schools of education by which to teach, it's a whole other question. There's another question that came up around room 4, but Latrenda referenced it in our breakout too. That, she was talking about a high school in Pittsburgh that was still doing block-based programming with Scratch with high school students, and it felt maybe a little age inappropriate. Not that everyone needs to be doing text-based coding on the high school level, but Scratch seems more upper elementary, middle school. I don't know if anybody who's with us today has experience in determining how you find age-appropriate CT learning opportunities that are engaging, how you've deciphered that for yourself, your own teachers.
This is something that there's another digital learning coach in our district, and this is a conversation that we have too. When I introduce myself, we have different pockets in our district of computer science and computational thinking happening. And even though we're doing this very intentional barrier removal, there are some schools that have elevated, I don't want to say compliance, but elevated participation with computer science and computational thinking than others. And so I really think it's that self-evaluation and looking at like, where's your school, where's your district? And, you know, if there isn't an opportunity for you to vertically align those opportunities for your students, it's more of looking like what's going to build so that you can get to a certain outcome. So if Scratch, you know, is something that can create a basis for you to build off of, looking at, you know, like how much time, what's the assignment, I think are better indicators of what's age appropriate than just saying, oh, well, these are in high school, they can't do Scratch at all. But if you do Scratch for 2 days and you're giving that, you know, exposure, it's going to build that confidence. So maybe that you can launch yourself into, you know, more high tech or high ranging ability to participate in CT and CS.
I appreciate that response. You're right, Kels. Are there other, I know we're running down on time, and I want to thank our 3 panelists once again, but other general questions that folk have? There's a question here about human-centered design, which I think also aligns itself with this question of pedagogy and age appropriateness. I'm going to ask a general question. One of the things that's always frustrated me about education is sometimes it's been the flavor of the month. You know, education gets initiatives, and then we wait a year, and then there's a new initiative. And anybody who's been around teaching for a while knows that you can get quite exhausted with the latest thing that's coming through. Sometimes I wonder if AI is going to be like that. But Neil kind of kept me honest in our breakout and said, hey, this is going to be around, it's sticking around. CS and CT has been sticking around. I mean, it's been going now for 20 years, and I think we've seen some nice gains. But I think, as our panelists point out, there's still a lot of challenges out there. Do we see this as an initiative that's going to continue to hold strength within districts, within schools? Is AI put more of a renewed focus on it? Or this is sort of a general question for our panelists, but for anybody who's on the line here as well. Minji, I see you thinking, so I'm gonna, yeah, okay.
Well, I wanted to specify a more recent example, as we're just about recruiting our new set of teachers interested in incorporating computational thinking and computer science into their curricula. Their interests, you know, initial interests for learning more about computational thinking and so on have been stemming a lot more from regular daily use of artificial intelligence in recent years than it ever has been. So in some sense, I think AI, if used wisely, could you know, encourage more teachers to consider computational literacy into their curricula, especially if they're given, you know, well-informed examples of both the goods and harms of how AI could be used in our daily settings. And then in some sense, would AI potentially, you know, replace computational thinking? I don't really think so, especially because there's just so many elements within AI that has to be understood with computational literacy and knowledge. But, you know, I know not everyone views it with that lens. So I think it's all, you know, the people who are educated, you know, task to kind of inform the right lens as to how to view computational thinking and AI going forward.
Right. That overlap. Listen, I know we are at time basically, but I just want to again thank our 3 panelists. Thank Stephanie, thank Jasmine for this illuminating hour. And I appreciate everyone getting on. I know how busy people are, and it's the end of the academic year, so it's particularly a crazy time.